Congratulations to the Michigan Wolverines on an amazing season. They win the 2024 College National Football Championship, um, presented by AT&T. Um, of course, you have to include that. It's not air quotes because it is true. It's presented by AT&T. It's important to note that. So what are my thoughts on this season? Well, it certainly is a season that is remarkable in every way. This is far none one of the best Michigan teams ever, if not the best one ever. Great talent. Jalen Harrell and his clutch plays. Mikey Sainristil. What can you say about him except I know he calls JJ McCarthy Miracle Boy, but oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. An 81-yard return in a game like that to almost score a pick six for the last time in your college football career, to just seal the game, and just that clutch tackle he had early in the game in the open field, just swinging him around. Yeah, got him. Wow. No, he is full of miracles. He is full of miracles. He is. Although I will say, the aura that JJ McCarthy has and what he puts forth to the entire team, that is miraculous within its own right. And that's something that ought to be applauded, because a lot of times it's amazing just how many quarterbacks that there are out there, or just players out there, they're kind of sour face, or they're just very just they're kind of fast talkers, right? They don't show much emotion. They're very sourpuss. I I'm glad to see the nice guy win. I'm glad to show all those doubters out there who say nice guys don't win. I like to put them in their place. So thank you, JJ McCarthy, and God bless you for that. That feels good. That feels really, really good. Blake Corum, as my dad refers to him as, the little guy. Um, a remarkable talent, a remarkable human being. I mean, somebody that I just listed the auras of all the other players. Well, okay, maybe only two of them so far in this conversation specifically. But he himself, I know, is going far. Especially when you emulate Barry Sanders, you know you're going far. God bless you, young man. I know he, and breaking the record for the most amount of touchdowns in the history of the Michigan football program in a single season. Remarkable. Or just, not just in a single season, but ever. Altogether, overall. He broke that record. He came back for another year to get his degree, because he cares about education and what's coming after the fact more than he does about simply the football. And that is something that every student should emulate. I know that I went to school for multiple years, not just 4 years in college. So that makes a big difference in terms of the knowledge that you acquire and how that applies to your future altogether. And gives you experience, gives you wisdom. Of course, that's if you're somebody that likes to be educated and doesn't just like to be told something. You want to learn and process all of that and apply it to the real world. That's who Blake Corum is. That's why he deserves all that he has to this very moment. And then, of course, all the other players, too. Mikey Sainristil was from Haiti, but guess who else was from Haiti? That was Junior Colson. And an amazing story he has. It's very similar to Michael Orr in many ways. He is he's going places himself. He has an amazing aura himself, and him playing through injury, I mean, that's not easy to do by any measure, not at all. And then they have your best offensive guard, Zach Zinter, go down and still be dominant against, Alabama and Washington. You proved yourself. And Iowa, by the way, scoring 26 points. You didn't give any points to them away. You played your best. You did your best. You did what you needed to do. Now, of course, and Ken Grant, of course, that video shot of him taking his helmet off and going into the air, that's at the Rose Bowl, that's always going to be baked into everybody's minds. So now the question is, okay, now you've won the national championship. But some people questioning, a lot of people questioning whether or not you belong to be there in the first place. And I understand where they come from. And I understand why there are people who feel, hey, how would have Coach Harbaugh, Sharon Moore, and Jesse Minter not know what was going on with Connor Stallions? Now, here's the thing. There's a couple possibilities. It's either one, Jim Harbaugh did not know, but let's say the coordinators knew. I think that's one of the two likely possibilities if, let's say, they did not know the full extent. So this is with that principle embedded in place. If they did not know to the full extent what was going on, okay, it would be either A, Jim Harbaugh did not know, but the coordinators knew, or B, Jim Harbaugh and the coordinators knew, but they didn't know that the signs were taken illegally. They probably knew there was a manifesto, but they didn't know it was done through illegal recording. That's if they didn't know the full extent. Those are the two possible scenarios. If they did not know by the full extent, those would be the two possible scenarios. We'll have to wait and see what the investigation pans out to be to know for certain. But it doesn't look good. But here's the overarching question to all of this is there's a lot of talk about vacating the wins that Michigan has acquired. Not knowing, of course, the improvisation that Michigan put into place. Not knowing some of the lucky plays that Michigan made with the bouncing off of defenders and catching those passes. Not knowing, the Roman Wilson Nebraska touchdown in the end zone, at the end of the end zone, was a classic example of that, classic symbolism of that a lot of improvisation was responsible for their victories, even with Stallions on the sideline. The way that Mikey Sainristil had to, in that Rutgers game, he was in a load of traffic, but yet he intercepted the ball and no one tracked him down. That's not, you can't coach that. You can't. So, to a certain extent, I have to defend these players, and it doesn't matter which team they came from, even if it was Ohio State. Okay? If they did those things, I'm going to go, well, isn't there more than what meets the eye? And I would say, yes, there is. I would logically be able to say that. It's logical. And of course, remember, it's not just about the actual taking of the signs, but it's also there's some allegations. I read this in the Free Press or USA Today, one of those two publications. They were saying that there was a Big Ten coach warning their players that there were Michigan ball boys holding the football in this hand or this hand, the right hand or the left hand. Well, yes, it is right and left. This is my right. I keep thinking this is a mirror, but it's not a mirror. It's showing the exact right and the exact left, which is good. So that's good. That's good. It's not a mirror. It's a camera. It's no mirror. It's a camera. And people at home are going, yes, it's a camera, Jack. Yes. But here's the thing. Even with that, I'm kind of still hesitant because you're like, but if you don't know which player on the right side or which player on the left side is going to get the ball, you don't know how quickly the ball is going to be thrown. You don't know, if the ball is going to be a lob or a slant, or if it's going to be necessarily a postal route, or if the wide receivers are going to maneuver somehow. I just think the execution is what made the biggest difference on the Michigan side. And because of that effort, because of that improvisation, that's what needs to be looked at the most. Now, if all the players had their own playbook and they knew that this came from the other team of the exact answers, then that might be a different story. And it's the same thing if, the players themselves are acquiring the radio telecommunications from the other sideline, or the players themselves are, forgive me, I know my eyes are going this way a lot because the camera's over here. I'm trying to stay focused on this, but but if the players themselves were doping, or they, or let's say the team was paying the opposing sideline to lose, or the opposing coaches to lose, the opposing players to lose, and it just, to me, that would be a lot more overarching in terms of effect on performance. It's obviously, it's not a gray area. It does have some effect, but it's a gray area in the fact, so it's not a total gray area is what I'm saying, but because somebody still has to be punished, it's clear. But it's enough of a gray area in that you can say, but there's still room for error, a lot of room for error. And there's room for error in terms of not making the right play or the right open field tackle. It's just, it's a little bit odd. But again, that's your judgment call. But even if the judgment call is, hey, I think it did have an overarching effect, the players did not have the supermajority of the work, or the players were not the supermajority result of the scores of those first 7 games when Stallions was still on the sideline. during this specific season, 2023, because it was still going on not just in 2021, 2022, but in 2023 as well. Even if that's the case, I think there's an even better conversation to be had here still. You see, rather than trying to strip someone away of something they won, if there's controversy surrounding it, because it's clear that not everybody thinks the same on this issue. Even I'm split on it. I have a split personality on this. Because I go, well, look. And it's not just a split personality on this. It's also like, wait a minute. There's also something else that's not being discussed here. Why have there been very few commentators on either television or radio that I've seen, or I've seen in the newspapers, say, hey, we ought to be pressuring the NCAA to, let's say, help these teams that feel aggrieved, like Rutgers, like Nebraska, like Bowling Green, like UNLV, that went to bowl games this year, by the way, so they were good enough to get to bowl games. Why not give them an extra bowl game? And or give them a rematch against Michigan. Now, of course, one of the criticisms will be, well, it's not practical to do that. Oh, yes, it is. You have all of January, you have all of February, you have all of March, you have some of April before the NFL draft. And for the players that are not going to the NFL draft, you have all of April, and you have all of May, and you have all of June, and July. You could do it any time you like. You could do it in a dome in June or July if it gets too hot. Fine by me. In fact, here's another suggestion. Have 3/4 of the crowd in favor of the opposing teams. 1/4 of the crowd in favor of Michigan. In a dome. So that it's loud. Okay? Here's another thing. Here's another thing you can do. If you think, hey, that's going to take too long to have all these different teams opposing Michigan, fine. Here's another thing you can do. Have the best players from each of those respective teams be part of a combination team against Michigan in a rematch. And whoever wins that game gets an even better looking trophy than the national championship trophy. They get a diamond-studded trophy rather than just a gold trophy. Okay? So have Tiffany & Co. come in, make a better trophy, and the reward to all those players, okay, or tuition, their student debt, or, hey, you know what? In fact, hey, why not go even bigger? Any health insurance their parent has, or anything that they're dealing with, or their houses, things like that, pay it off. Or if their business is dealing with debt for their parents, pay that off. The NCAA will pay it off. And you could have the poorest communities that are surrounding these said universities that would be involved in this particular event against Michigan. The NCAA would make their biggest donation in history to these communities as a reward. So you have a lot on the line that I'm sure these players are like, hey, we're going to be extra motivated to go hard against Michigan. And if you win, you get to vacate Michigan's title. So you don't have to go years and years and years into this investigation. You could just do it right here. You'd save all that time and all that money. put that money towards more useful resources regarding education, which you're supposed to be focused on. Speaking of the topic we were just talking about earlier with Blake Corum. And let's say if Michigan wins, with all that against them, okay, they keep their title. All right? They get to keep their title. So you have this one game. You have this rematch. Okay? And even if you don't want that to be the end of the story, you could have an extra bowl game for all these teams. How about that? Do something like that. And once again, those extra bowl games would have these really crystal diamond-like trophies. That, again, doing something nice for those people that feel aggrieved. This is something that, for some reason, I have not heard in the mainstream. You'd think it'd be one of the first things that pops up. You'd be like, hey, I would love that chance. This is actual justice. I'm actually getting recognition. I'm going to have millions and millions of people watch this. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, unlike the national championship. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing that I get to participate in. You'd think people would go crazy for this. You'd think people would have already suggested this instead of just, little old me with a white background here. But nothing. I mean, we're still remodeling the house, so it's like, it's because we were in a flood in August, by the way. Shortly before college football season. Might have been right as it was happening. No, it was before. It was August 23rd that the flooding took place, and then into August 24th. Ironically enough, 23 into 24. Was that a sign? No, I'm just kidding. But if you're really being serious, and not just serious that I want to punish someone. I mean, no, serious in terms of being logical and actually establishing justice instead of vengeance, this would be the way to go. Well, the NCAA, that's their fault. They should quicken up the investigation. Wait a minute. I guarantee you, these are the very same people who say, no, the investigation's got to have due process. When it comes to any other situation, it's got to have due process. But when it comes to this particular situation, the due process is already done. Well, that's true. You do have to speed up the process to a certain extent for practicality reasons. The Big Ten, right, is in that situation where they have to make a decision right here and then. That's fine. That's one thing. But then when it comes to an actual complete investigation in terms of the main governing body, not the Big Ten, the main governing body, the NCAA, now all of a sudden so I can understand your point of view with the Big Ten. That's fine. Yes, you do have to quicken up the due process. That's fine. And as we saw, Michigan went to court and they threw out any objections they had because they knew, there were some people on our sideline that were doing the wrong thing. And good. It's good to admit that you're wrong. That's fantastic. You have to do that. Okay? That's the first step in letting go of denial. All right? But when it comes to the main governing body, seeing how far this went and, did this really have an overarching effect on the games in question? No, that does take time. You do have to observe that in this conventional situation. That's why I'm saying take away the conventionality and make it simple and just say, hey, you have this one game where you can get redemption. And if that redemption works, then you can officially take away Michigan's title and say, hey, you know what? Okay, This was the proving point. Boom, done. And we're over. But if Michigan proves himself, let's say, with all of that stacked against them, then, and by the way, even if you say, okay, you can't have 3/4 of the crowd, it has to be the entire crowd that's consistent of those other teams. Okay, boom, you got it, done, check mark. Okay, good. That's right. I got to remember this is not a mirror; it's a camera. The check mark is being drawn the correct way. So, look, that would be real justice. Okay. Not this just taking something away from someone else. It's a practical thing to do, but it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Practicality does not equal correctness. It just doesn't. There's plenty of things in this world that are. Oh, by the way, improvisationality doesn't mean it's correct either. So just because I've stressed the point about improvisation, that doesn't necessarily mean it's right either. Okay, or either. I've said either as well. Doesn't really matter. Take your pick. But that is something you also need to be aware of. Okay? And look, at the end of the day, I think if none of this happens, it's a shame if this type of redemption ideal doesn't come into fruition. But what I do know is that in the future it does need to happen. If something like this happens again, if there's controversy, you name it, in any sport, doesn't matter which sport it is. Should have happened with the Astros. Okay? Should have happened with Kansas. All right? And again, with that part about due process, yes, you do have to kind of quicken up the pace as it pertained to the Big Ten, because the Big Ten championship was coming up very soon, and you have to make a decision, right? So I think for Michigan to be booing Tony Petitti, I didn't really like that at all. The guy has a tough decision to make. Leave him alone. But then, right, if you're like me, okay, that's going to be non-biased in that situation, then you also have to be non-biased in the NCAA taking its time to have an investigation. Unless you're like me and you say, hey, I want to take away all that conventionality altogether. Charlie Baker, take all that away. All right? To me, that's what I would do. All right? Now, I don't know if this is the same Charlie Baker I think it's the same Charlie Baker who was the former governor of Massachusetts. So, if he doesn't do that, if he doesn't throw away conventionality, then he's just a typical politician. I guess a lot of people in Massachusetts really like him, though, I'm not from Massachusetts. I went to Massachusetts once. It's a very beautiful state. I think it was a little odd that the mayor of Boston was throwing a racist party, but other than that, it's a really nice place to be. And they have really good education there, by the way. So, and their public education is really good. So you understand why, they do really well. The only reason I mentioned public education, the connection there was because I was criticizing a Democratic mayor, a more liberal mayor of Boston, and so I can understand why, because public education is doing really well in Massachusetts, people trust liberalism more, right? I guarantee you they didn't ask for the Boston mayor to do whatever, hot mess that was. um, but anyways, the point of the matter is this. The point of the matter is this. If you really want justice rather than vengeance, okay, by the way, the same goes for our criminal justice system. If you don't want to just apply it to this, apply it to a criminal justice system. A lot of times maybe we're not punishing people enough, or we punish them too much, right? Or you punish people a lot, and you might say, hey, that's the right thing to do, but then there's never anything after that, like, oh, there should be community service to repay the victims that you hurt, the specific victims that you hurt. So let's say you rob their store. Maybe instead of locking that person in jail, you say, hey, you're required to work for that person with supervision by the police or another, let's say, independent security agency, right? That work with the police, okay? Just don't use the Pinkerton agency. Just kidding. I'm sure they're not the same as they used to be, but, Pinkerton's a little shady, given their history, long ago. But anyways, but just try to think outside the box, okay? In anything in life, and this is one of them. This is a huge example of that. Give the teams that feel aggrieved, okay? Even if I feel that, hey, I think the way Michigan ran out of the pocket, the way that Blake Corum ran through the middle, which is hard to do, the way Mikey Sainristil improvised, the way he caught interceptions in traffic in that Rutgers game, for example. All of these, the way Jalen Harrell tackled, the way the defensive line played, the way the offensive line did their best. I'm with Desmond Howard on this one, for example. I think there was a lot more than what meets the eye on this. I think there was a lot more to the story than just what Stallions had contributed within, for example, those first 7 games. And, the fact that, again, J.J. McCarthy, his best friend, had died. He used to play for UNLV. Had I think it was a 47-yard touchdown. And 47 was the number on his friend's shirt. And you kind of go, can that be something that's done from the help of an illegal source? I just think that's a bit of a stretch. That there's a reason why this stuff happened other than just illegality. And so that's something that I would hope people would account for and say, hey, okay, because of that, let's just settle it right here. Let's have a rematch game and let's see. Okay? We'll still be like, hey, Michigan still did an amazing job against the likes of Alabama and Washington, but if they lose, they lose, and the title has to be taken away. Full stop. Okay? Rules is rules. But if Michigan even wins that game, then you kind of have to go, you know what? I think we're being a little too hasty here towards them. I think they got caught in a very complicated situation, and we kind of wanted to be the enforcer a little too much and not really the human, right? We wanted to be the android that went AWOL instead of the humanoid that became more understanding. We wanted to be, you know, the moral champions here, but in the end, we lost the entirety of the world with it, with that expedition, if you will. And so I would hope that somebody put it on change.org. That's one website you can go to. If you want, I'll do it. Or you can do it, or somebody will do it, or hopefully somebody sees this and says, well, perhaps this would be a really good situation. Perhaps this might help to open people's minds even more. And sometimes when you have these things like this, these, ironically enough, improvisational exercises, it opens your mind up when it comes to many other different aspects of life. You name it, finances, politics, the environment, inventions. Inventions, maybe space travel, calculating the weather, because sometimes when you do these little exercises, these puzzles, because I do it all the time, word searches, when people these days are just only looking at their phones, well, or maybe they're doing Wordle, but it's, again, on their phone. It doesn't require a pencil and writing. Those exercises can open your mind up to many more different kinds of solutions in this world that you didn't really consider in the first place. Or maybe you did consider, but you started to go, that's ridiculous. But if you give it some thought, it won't be as ridiculous as you first thought. So, anyway, that's my perspective on that. I had to give that perspective because I go, look, if we're going to judge the championship accurately, this is what you have to do. This is what you have to do to judge it accurately in a timely manner. Isn't that what people wanted? They said this has to be in a timely manner. Well, then here you go. This would make it so you can do it in a timely manner. But, and by the way, it's not only that you're just winning a trophy. As I said, if opposing teams win, that's consisted of players from all of these schools in question that felt aggrieved by what Michigan did, all the best players on this all-star team, and they won. Well, their whole school, the kids would have their tuition paid in full, okay, and their parents, if they have debt on their home or debt on their business or debt somewhere else, that's paid off by the NCAA. So it's even bigger than football. Isn't this something that would be just huge? That would be true redemption? True justice? Rather than just simply saying, hey, we're going to take this away from someone else. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And by the way, let's say even if that all-star team loses, well, guess what? In return, the NCAA will make the biggest donation possible that they've ever made to the poorest of poor communities within these respective areas around these said universities. Rutgers, so Rutgers is in New Jersey. For example, all of the poorest communities in New Jersey would receive huge swaths of money for development directly from the NCAA. or whatever money was going to come to the NCAA from the government, that now is required to go, instead of to the bonuses to the executives in the NCAA, that's now required to go to the communities that are the poorest of the poor in, let's say, for example, New Jersey. That would make a big difference. Or look, I've gone 40 minutes on this. 40 minutes, but yet we're discussing years of an investigation, and people go and or people are saying, well, speed it up. This shouldn't take any more than just 10 minutes to understand. Okay, well, if that's the world that we're supposed to live in, I say it's full of clowns. Okay, or as Travis Kelce would say, you're a clown. Okay, but I don't want to live in a world with clowns. Okay, I've already got hair that's clownish enough. I don't need to deal with actual clowns to remind me of what's in the mirror. Speaking of mirrors. But that's the thing. I would want to, that would be real justice. That would be something that makes sense. If you really want to help, that's what you do. If you're just simply vacating wins, how do you think the other teams are going to feel? They'll be like, okay, well, I guess that's some kind of solace. Thanks. No, they're just going to feel flat. That's not that's not justice. No. That's fool's gold is what that is. That's fool's gold. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong, fool's gold is very pretty, but it's not the real gold. Okay? It's not the real prize. And we know for certain that doesn't take more than 10 minutes to figure out. Certainly not more than 5 minutes. Maybe not even 2. Okay? So, no, it is more complicated, and you have to have a complicated solution. You have to have a solution that involves ingenuity. So, anyways, yeah, I mean, that's what I think of this season. I kind of, and the controversy altogether, I haven't really spoke about it. This is my first video in a long time, a year or so on YouTube, and so the last time I had a video was wishing JJ McCarthy happy birthday. Because I like him. I think he's a really good kid. I think he put to bed a lot of the whole, nice guys never win. That inspired me. That inspired me to be somebody who myself smiles a lot, to be more of myself. So that's why, to a certain extent, I am somewhat passionate about this, because I go, well, but wait a minute. You want to take away those awards from him, knowing the kind of person he is? No. Over my dead body. Over my dead body. Okay? I'll be the first to attest, wait a second, there has to be more to the story here. No matter how you look at that story, there's always more to the story. And I think the character of each of these people tells the biggest story. Now, there was some controversy involved because J.J. McCarthy was in a press conference after the Rose Bowl game, and somebody asked him about what did he think about the cheating scandal, and he said something to the effect of, well, we knew Ohio State was taking our signs in 2019 or 2020, And by the way, with all due respect, there's a really good radio host that I like. His name is Mike Valeni. Um, but he didn't really analyze the other half of what J.J. McCarthy said. A lot of people didn't. They just kind of went, well, he's defending cheating. But if you look at the other half of what he said, well, we were looking at film and looking at the posture of players and where each player was lined up. And Trevor Keegan, by the way, everybody picks on J.J. McCarthy here, but they didn't really look at what Trevor Keegan had to say, who is the offensive lineman. Now, everybody thinks, hey, J.J. McCarthy is just this gushy little figure. We can mess with him all day long. You ain't messing with Trevor Keegan. Trust me on that. You're not going to say whatever you're saying to his face. Okay? He said, hey, same thing. We're trying to figure out new plays, and by the way, I guarantee you some of what they're doing has to involve, hey, hitting the weight room more and training better. Yeah, I agree. Okay, I agree. It does take determination. It does take grit. Hey, that's what the Lions have done. That's another Michigan team you have to look out for. We'll see if they can match what the Wolverines have done. The Wolverines win their first undisputed title since as of right now, undisputed. Right now is undisputed. I just mean they didn't split a title with someone else. First time that's ever happened since 1948. So there's no excuse for the Lions to win their first, as of right now, technically undisputed title since the 50s. Okay? So, and look, that's one of the things that you have to adjust for, is the fact that we know that these players were not just doing it because of some wacko whack job on the sideline. They did it mostly through their own volition. And that had the overarching effect. I mean, that's where I'm coming from. I think that's what... And so that's why I say, hey, there's a lot of people who misunderstand J.J. McCarthy. They all thought he was a goober because of what he said. In fact, I did see some YouTube comments that were saying, oh, you're a goober for saying that we'll be back. I promise you that. Oh, you're acting like Tim Tebow, when you did that after the TCU loss. No, it turns out he proved himself right. He wasn't trying to prove anybody wrong. He proved himself right. He proved himself right because he knew he had confidence, and he was right to have that confidence, and they did play well, and they were disciplined. Okay? To me, right there, that tells you all you need to know. But I'm willing to go an extra step and say, hey, let's have one more game to make that hypothesis confirmed for all of you. Okay? So that I'm not biased. Fair enough? All right. And one last thing. In times like these, when, speaking of hastiness, when there's so much going on in this world, controversy abound in terms of politics. I mean, you have somebody who is in the White House right now who, quite frankly, they're not really doing that good. Kind of okay because of the infrastructure bill. I liked the fact that there was the very first, there was some money being adjudicated to the very first glow-in-the-dark parks in the United States. I don't know if anybody knows that, but if you want to look at that, you can. I thought that took some ingenuity, and hey, okay, maybe you think that's not the you might think, hey, that's not the best use for tax dollars, but you might go, hey, if it keeps kids active, and maybe keeps them from committing vandalism at night, instead they're just playing with their friends and stuff like that, then okay, maybe it's not waste at the very least. But unfortunately, there's been still too much waste in government, and it's not being addressed. And there's questions about, what the president has done with his son in terms of their business dealings with China and all of that. And so it does make you question the system. And of course, what's going on with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and both sides are not having the full truth revealed. For example, people are saying, well, Israel's committing genocide, but that's not true. There are Hamas fighters they're going after. And I think Douglas Murray points that out well. And then on the flip side, I think, for example, you have people that say, wait, this is way too unnecessary of civilians being killed. And I think, for example, there's a good commentator by the name of Jimmy Dore who points this out, and he even pointed out to where, yes, Hamas had committed rapings on October the 7th, but look what happened in 1948. It was the same thing, but it was flipped to the other side. The Israeli side was raping civilians. Jimmy Dore had posted a video about this a ways back, a couple months, maybe a month or two back. You have to see it. So go to his channel and you'll see. I think the title involved soldiers laughing and grinning at these types of tragedies. For more information on that, okay. Now, no matter who's doing it, it's wrong, and it still doesn't take away from it. You can't obfuscate from the fact that Hamas has to be eliminated. They do. They have to be gone. Okay, so as much as you may not like Netanyahu, you have to say, hey, he's right, that Hamas has to go. As much as you kind of like, well, Netanyahu's a little bit weird and a bit of a Yahoo himself for letting money go to Hamas in the first place from Qatar, he's right that they have to go. Because Hamas themselves, if anything, the genocide claim could actually be applied to Hamas against the Palestinians, because they themselves have terrorized Palestinians. They ended democracy, for goodness sakes, in the Palestinian territories. So that's another thing. Now, of course, I think there's certainly a lot of inhumane treatment, towards Palestinians by the Israeli side as well. The stripping of people and posting it online, and by the IDF, and even in the West Bank, the IDF forcing people out of houses, and the cutting off of of water and fuel during non-war conditions in the Gaza Strip, and the removing of solar panels. Yeah, I mean that's problematic, and the settlements that are illegal and all of that. There's nothing. It's all very frustrating. It is, and I get why people say, "Oh, but you did this and you did that, so that nullifies what we did, but that nullifies what we did." No, 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 no. Just hit the reset button, and just realize that, hey, listen, you all did something that was wrong. There's all this kind of like, hey, this is ironic, like I pointed out with the situation of Hamas doing a similar thing to what the Israeli side did in 1948. Since you both did something that's wrong, since you both did something that's terroristic at one point or another, no matter if it was in the present or in the past, and that present and the past had an effect on this or that, you did it. And you have to be held accountable for it. So, Hamas, you have to go. And the Israeli government, I think you have to be voted out because this is still not good. And by the way, another thing people don't discuss, hey, the Pentagon, you are the main suppliers towards the Israeli government, and yet everybody wants to go after the Israeli government. But the Israeli government's being supplied by the United States. The United States itself should not be supplying dumb bombs, so that's on them. Okay, that's on them. The Israeli government can't control for that, but the United States government can. They're the ones supplying the weapons. They have a lot more money in their arsenal than Israel does. Okay? So the United States government should be doing a better job. You could be supplying robots that drill into the ground to expose these tunnels rather than having to supply bombs that implode buildings, so you can more safely get into these areas and maybe blow out the terrorists and actually get the hostages safely. You could do that. You could do that. Okay? In fact, here's what else you could do. And because, obviously those tunnels are dangerous, you don't want to have another Black Hawk Down situation. I know Destiny, another fellow YouTuber, fellow Twitch user, was pointing this out. Hey, when you go into the tunnels, it's very dangerous. Yes. So, the United States government, you should also be supplying drones, like a drone army, that's equipped with bullets. So rather than just having drones equipped with missiles, you could equip some drones with bullets to shoot at these specific terrorists if you don't want to risk human life of military members into these tunnels. So it's also incumbent on the United States government to just, or any idea. It doesn't have to be one of those two ideas. It could be anything that's, again, improvisational in nature that reduces civilian casualties and actually gets the hostages out safely without risking military member lives as well. You don't even have to worry about that either. But there's the either. So, I would hope that people will understand all of those nuances, right? Now I'm getting too much into politics, but all I'm saying is that's a confusing situation, okay? And then you have confusing situations with the Boeing situation, 737 MAX, the doors flying off and people worried about even flying anymore. And then you got, and just uncomfortable with flying anymore because of the bad customer service and things like that. And then you've got, and the prices and things like that. And then you've got, inflation going on. This is far more pertinent to, like, if you're just somebody sitting at home and you don't have a say in any of this, the inflation going on with food, and gas, and water bills, and health insurance, and electricity, and all of that. Clothing, okay? Shrinkflation is another thing that's going on, okay? And then learning that it's not only just because of the government printing money, you're learning because corporations themselves are also taking advantage of this. And you know this for a fact because companies like Costco are not caving in to this raising of the prices, even when they pay their workers higher than average salary. So you're kind of thinking, well, that must mean there's definitely something that's up. Yes, there is. You're right. You're absolutely right. Especially with the egg situation, when egg prices went up, everybody would say, well, it's because of bird flu. But no, it was actually because many of these companies were actually intentionally killing their chickens. And they're just using the bird flu as a cover up. And so, thus, that lowers the supply of the chickens needed to make the eggs, to give birth to the eggs. And then, well, lower supply with a high demand, you're going to have increase in prices to try to lower that demand to buy some extra time so you can get more eggs without running out. Because once you run out, then you're really screwed. So, all of that involved, right? And then with the gas situation, right? People are like, well, but wait a minute. Joe Biden wanted to cut the oil. He did, but then you come to find out, oh, he's actually drilling a record amount of oil. That's true, but then you come to find out he could have done something about reopening these oil refineries. I see. And then you come to find out, oh, well, during COVID, so could have President Trump. He could have also put money towards those oil refineries as well and chose not to do that. And then he chose to put all the blame on Biden. And then it's like, oh, I see. It's again another complicated situation. It seems like inhumanity abound. We're just going to blame here, there. Oh, it's on the Keystone Pipeline. Yeah, but you still have a record amount of oil. Okay, but maybe the Keystone Pipeline could have made the refining process easier, but you still have the old Keystone Pipeline. Okay, but but we still have rail. Yeah, but the rail's not as efficient as the pipeline. Okay. So, with all that arguing going on, here's my final note. When I saw at the end of that game, Michael Penix Jr., he was all beaten up. So this is how this all relates. Just in case you thought, hey, I was just rambling on. No. If you're patient, you'll understand how it connects. Michael Penix at the end of the game goes into the tunnel, and you think, okay, it's the usual situation. The player goes in the tunnel, they're beaten up, they feel embarrassed. But yet, you had somebody who actually took the effort and the time to go in the tunnel with him and console him. And one of those people was one of the people that was hitting him most of the night, and that was Jalen Harrell. And that tells you what you need to know. That tells you what you need to know. That in times like these, where there's a lot of bad sportsmanship and a lot of just blame being pointed and people of opposing sides just hating each other, you should try to act more like that. You should try to act more like that. That would be something you should emulate. Case closed. With that, I say, have a great day, have a great night, wherever you may be. Yes, go blue, but more importantly, let's hope that we can also say yes to humanity, yes to miracles, yes to improvisationality, yes to just being yourself and not trying to be like someone else. Just being together with others and togetherness and the symbolism of togetherness. Let's go with that. Thank you.